Here we are again. Yay. Guess what, guys? Doing this and recording this for the, I don't know, third, maybe fourth time at this point. I mean, because my goddamn, for whatever reason, we keep having recording issues around here. Hello everyone, my name's Ash, and welcome to an episode of OnReviewCast. And today we're still looking at House of the Dragon. But guess what, guys? This is the final episode of House of the Dragon, Season 1, on review.
HBO series, House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 10.
So we're taking a look at Season 1 of House of the Dragon on review. And this episode is entitled The Black Queen. And just like every other episode, guys, we're going to give you an episode breakdown on courtesy of fandom. So yeah, synopsis. The Black Queen is the 10th and final episode of the first season of the House of the Dragon. It is the 10th episode of the series overall, and it premiered on October 23rd, 2022 on HBO and HBO Max. It was written by Ryan Condal and directed by Greg Yandes. Yeah. So, synopsis. While mourning a tragic loss, Rhaenyra tries to hold the realm together, and Daemon prepares for war. War! Prepares for war! Arrgh. I don't know. I was just doing something. So this episode was, getting back into it, because I mean, again, I mentioned before, we had already previously recorded this episode, guys, and I'm not kidding when I say that this is the most annoying thing ever. We lost the original data. I blame Mark. Mark, get your ass in here. You're fired. I'm kidding, guys. There's no Mark. He's no longer with us. I'm just I'm kidding. Well, yeah, about this episode. First of all, guys, before we even just really jump into this, I guess I want to say thank you so much to everyone that's been, on this journey with me, honestly and truly. Thank you, everyone who has rocked with me here on the OnReviewCast, this journey of House of the Dragon. I know some days were easier, or some days were not so easy, and sometimes were when I say not so easy and not so easy, some days, some weeks, I haven't been able to necessarily put out an episode, but nonetheless, I am happy that you guys are listening and watching and paying attention to the things that I am putting out there for OnReviewCast. Thank you guys so much for paying attention. But yeah, I guess let's just jump right into the episode. This episode starts off and kind of picks up right where the other one leaves off. And we get a opening scene with Jacaerys, Rhaenyra's son. And what happens basically is she's trying to comfort him and let him know that, hey, look, like, you're going through all these things, and all these people are making these claims about how you're not legitimate, X, Y, and Z, and not to necessarily worry about that, and I got your back like how my father had my back. Then, basically from the previous episode, Rhaenys comes back and tells them the news of basically everything that's basically been happening within King's Landing, since they left. Jacaerys dying and Aegon basically becoming king, her escaping, where she could have just basically lit all of them on fire, but she decided not to because she's like, oh, it's not my war. And as a reaction, given the circumstances, given everything that was happening, I feel like this is an appropriate reaction. Again, this is necessary to say or tell someone. You can't tell someone not to go into labor. So under extreme stress, obviously, Rhaenyra starts going into labor. She starts having the baby because she's been pregnant at this point, and she is pregnant at this point. And she's struggling with the child. And so much so that, but she also is fighting, I guess, any kind of help from any of the maidens that's around her or whatever. For some reason, I don't know why, but she's like, no, get off. I don't want to help. I guess because all of it is basically stress induced from the fact that, the crowd is being given to Aegon, etc. Well, in light news of this, Daemon is just like upset, and he starts to think that, you know, the Greens have somehow poisoned Viserys in this time of him trying to. In a moment of weakness, he believes that the Greens poisoned them, and he basically wants revenge, and now he wants to go to war. But during this time, while Rhaenyra is basically in labors with this child, trying to get through this pregnancy and this birth of this child, she calls Jacaerys and Chase to basically tell them that, hey, you know, Daemon's on the warpath, he's planning his war, but like nothing is to be done without my say so or without me being there. Normal shit, right? I mean, the audacity, honestly, well, not the audacity, but this, I gotta say, the pure strength that Rhaenyra basically shows here within these few couple of scenes is definitely something to be admired by, I guess I want to say. I can only imagine. I know that, you know, and I'm a male, heterosexual male, always been a male, always will be a male. I can only imagine the amount of pain, though, that one would have to endure to actually give birth to a child, like birthing and giving life to actual another human being. Can you imagine the amount of, you know, fortitude that you would need to have physically and, you know, even mentally as a woman to get through that? And so she makes it known, and to that fact, to still also be worried about the truly showing her strength, to also be worrying about the things that's happening around her, like her half brother basically usurping the throne, because it's supposed to be her and not necessarily Aegon on top of the throne now. So Chase goes to Daemon, and he's kind of like, well, wait, hold on, everybody, wait a minute. Mom doesn't want anything to be going on right now. He doesn't want any decisions being made. And in this moment, I got to point out, if anybody noticed it, it's kind of like Daemon is kind of like ignores Chase a little bit, and he still starts to give out orders. And the men in the room, all of them, they start to obey all of Daemon's orders, despite the message that Jacaerys had just delivered from his mom. I mean, I think this kind of foreshadows and gives us a little bit of like how, well, basically the chain of command is basically going to go in terms of like, well, Rhaenyra is basically ruling, and how Daemon now, despite her now becoming queen, might be a little bit of a problem. Still feeling a little bit weird about Daemon, still on the fence about him. Not exactly sure where he stands in certain regards to, you know, being on the side of the queen. It's like, it's kind of like he's on the side of the queen, but I also find it feels like at the same time he's still on the kind of his own side, you know? And through this episode, we also see that he's like obsessed with dragons, and rightfully so. It's an important topic, I think, because like that's how they first conquered the Westeros in the country or whatever, because of Aegon the First of his name with his two sisters came to Westeros. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, this is basically the book's territory now. They more or less might cover this stuff when they go into doing and branching out into different series within the Game of Thrones universe. But this has to do with the books when Aegon the first came and conquered Westeros and all of those and united the Seven Realms. And he did this with the help of dragons, and he was only able to do it with dragons. And this is actually talked about in the Game of Thrones as well. Not just me, you know, making reference to this series for House of Dragons. So it's an important topic, and I think that Daemon is motivated, and he's guided. He's motivated, and he's holding fast to that fact and to that idea that dragons will win the day. And I feel like in this episode we really see the obsession that Daemon essentially has with these beasts. And they play an important role. I will say that they play an important role within the story. It's called House of the Dragon, right? I mean, it's not called like, I don't know, House or something or whatever. It's House of the Dragons. You want to see dragons? You got more dragons. Sorry, that just reminded me of the Joe Rogan podcast, where he's kind of like, I want more dragon. I wish we had more dragon. I don't know why. What was it almost sounds like a sexually dirty thing. You know what I mean? Like, I want more dragon. I want to see more dragon. I don't know. That fucking guest that he had on there was fucked. I don't know. You guys know what I'm talking about. Comment in the comments. That one guy they had on Joe Rogan who wanted more dragon. Oh God. Yeah, it's great. So the pregnancy happens. That's basically happening with Rhaenyra, and the thing is, she loses the baby, and I've got to talk about it for a second. This baby that she lost was maldeformed and had a bunch of all kind of crazy stuff on it. But it was a stillbirth, unfortunately, and I realize that happens sometimes, but it was a stillbirth, and really one of those rougher, hardcore HBO Game of Thrones type of scenes, because it was deformed in terms of like having scales on it, and I think George R. Martin or how Game of Thrones books actually talk about this as well, and they go into talking about how, just like how that girl, I forget what her name was on Game of Thrones, but she had scales, and sometimes mutations happen. That has a lot to do with, I think, the Valyrian and Ovalarian blood, of how they were first interacting with dragons in the first place, and how they got to dragons to come up with control, which is pretty much magic, right? So it's basically magic. That it's I think what it really is, it's the recoil or the backlash from actually having such connection, clearly from a spiritual perspective that manifests itself to physical perspective, of these wild, uncontrollable beasts, honestly. And then in this episode, we had the kneeling of Queen Rhaenyra. When Queen Rhaenyra, as the episode suggests, they crowned her. So she survives the stillbirth and all that stuff. She survives it, and they bury their unborn child. And everybody recognizes her as the queen, and they kneel to her. And everybody kneels except, I find it funny, everybody kneels except Rhaenys. And during these during this episode specifically, in few episodes back, and I think the first episode, you remember, if you guys remember, there was this talk of if anybody would even respect Rhaenyra or take Rhaenyra seriously if she was a queen. And I think that's why Rhaenys is kind of like hesitantly like not going along with deciding essentially a side of who to be on quite yet when it comes to not only this war, but if she can't support and loyalty to Rhaenyra. Although I feel like she should, that's her cousin, right? Like you should want the proper things to basically essentially go down. But it just looks like for right now, during these few couple of scenes, she's very on the fence about whose side she's really on. Yeah, honestly. So then I thought was funny though in this was that when they're walking to this strategy room, right? That they're basically supposed to be a part of, and she's walking with the guard, and you can tell none of them are essentially used to this. Rhaenyra is walking with them at first, and she basically stops and pauses in the room, and everybody gazes upon her. They take a gander or wonder at it, and they bow their heads and they show respect towards the queen. Sorry, and she walks forward, and the knights behind her try to follow, and she's like, "Oh, no, we don't do that." No, calm down. And then Bela gives her a wine, a cup of wine. And you can tell how unused to she is to this situation and to royalty in the first place. Because if you remember back, she wasn't really, her father named her heir, but this wasn't really something that she, I guess, we saw it a long time coming, but I don't know if, I can't really say this is something that she particularly wanted. But when the father did give it to her, she was kind of like, yeah, okay, like if you're inheriting this to me, then yeah, I'll take it. Kind of. But other than that, I feel like before that and earlier, it wasn't really too much of a concern when it came to specifically Rhaenyra, honestly. So something again undermining her in this strategy room. Daemon, we see that a little bit in this as well. He kind of takes control of the conversation within the room when he starts to talk about like the dragons and etc. And things that he has done during Rhaenyra's labor and during Rhaenyra's pregnancy. Even though she specifically said not to fucking do anything, Daemon went ahead and sent ravens out to particular parties to see if they would join in the claiming of the correct proclaiming of her of the kingdom, putting her as queen. And it just kind of, just like I said, like displays the undermining tone that Daemon basically plays within this role. I mean, it just gives us an unsettling, shifty feeling about Daemon and basically where to place him on the side of, yes, he's on the side of Rhaenyra, or no, he's just for himself. And I think it's a little bit of A and a little bit of B also. So, yeah. I like how, like, in this too, she turns to Rhaenys and she's like, well, we will hope the support of Driftmark would like basically help us, which is basically essentially her and our husbands, army and their supplies and their resources. And Rhaenys has not picked a side. She tells them that, hey, it's something that I had to just basically, essentially, hey, I got something that I got to discuss with my husband. I can't necessarily give you an answer right now. I can't necessarily tell you, like, yeah, I'm on your side right now. But later in the conversation, Daemon says that, you know, oh, we have Baelise, Vermax, Arex. These are living all of these dragons or whatever, and he names Baelise in it. And like the way how Rhaenys like looks at him, like this, like, motherfucker, did you not hear me? I said that I don't know. I gotta talk to my husband. Like, motherfucker, do you have Baelise? Like, do you? Do you have my dragon? I'm not joining. My dragon's not joining your war. I don't know. Basically, but yes, it was. It still seems that like I said, it's undercutting her every inch of the way. Daemon is still doing it, and I can't help but think that it's only because, or it's mainly because of the whole, you know, centuries old way of thinking that, you know, men must be in charge. It should be a queen and not a queen, and not a queen. It should be a king and not a queen. And that. It makes me wonder if that there's any possible way that Daemon could be swayed or will basically defect to the other side of the Greens, maybe in season 2, or maybe in the next coming episodes and early days of season 2. Like I said, like I don't think he's on anybody's side; he's on his own side. So we return back to while they're having this meeting. Actually, they start to see the ships of the Greens, and the Otto fucking Hightower has now come to the shores to visit them. And just like in the first season, if you look at it, there's a lot of similarities between the first season. Wouldn't have to necessarily look hard, because there's a lot of similarities between the first and the second episode, the first and the last episode of House of the Dragon, because in the first episode of House of the Dragon, it was just basically the same thing, but the only thing is that Daemon's whore was there as well. So it was Otto fucking Hightower on one side, Daemon on one side. They both have their man, and they're both a wild out. And Rhaenyra basically flies in on a dragon to save them, almost beat for beat. It's essentially the same thing as the first episode during the sequence. And Rhaenyra has to basically hold down the fort and stop a massacre from essentially happening. And the way how they play that full circle, in my opinion, honestly, great. Enjoyed it. I thought that was kind of cool. Just basically proved that she's still the same person. She's still the same Rhaenyra, even though she's a little bit more grown up now. She will try to keep the level-headedness and be one to call for peace. That's the kind of ruler she is, and that's the kind of ruler that she'd be. That spoke everything to me when it basically came to that. So they start talking, and Otto fucking Hightower basically lays down his terms. He's like, hey, lay down your swords and X, Y, and Z, and you'll all be forgiving, and it'll all be expunged and basically go away. And we are willing to recognize your sons as the royal, blah, 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 the Driftmark, and the Dragonstones, and blah, 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 all this other stuff. But you must swear to the basis, or you swear to the king that is now King Aegon. And the entire time while he's talking, right? It's so funny. Damon's just looking at. If Damon is just getting angrier and angrier and angrier, and I was just he's just it's so funny because Damon's kind of almost rolls his neck. It's well, what the fuck you gonna say to this shit? What you gonna fuck to say to this shit, Rhaenyra? You must be crazy or out of your mind for even possibly thinking some kind of alliance is gonna work with these motherfuckers. It's just he was the doting bitch wife, or when two men are trying to handle that's basically a situation. And I thought that was hilarious. She was just rolling his neck what the fuck he was just seething with anger, and you could see it in his mannerisms and his actions and his tone of voice. He was ready to wild out. He was ready to bug. He was just ready to go. But that's oh, sorry guys. That's not necessarily what happens or how it goes down. And Rhaenyra goes up to the Green, the Otto fucking Hightower, goes up to her and pulls goes up to him and pulls the pin for the King of the Hand off him and fucking tosses it to the side. And at this point, these motherfuckers are ready to bug. They're ready to wild out. They're ready to go. But also, something I thought about just now too, what I thought about when I was watching it was that when she took the was close enough to him to take the pin. What would have happened if she had just instead of actually just taking this pin, I'm gonna stab you in the eye with it, and that slap you in the eye or stab you somewhere else. And that would have been a shocking surprise, but I feel that's when everybody would have wilded out and started essentially fighting. And she's trying to keep peace. And the way that Alicent has tried to reach out to her is by sending that ripped, torn out pages of the book that was essentially being read to her. I think it was in episode 4 or 5. You guys might remember this. Rhaenyra was reading a book, and in this book, she was I think Alicent or Rhaenyra was reading a book, and the page was torn out of it. And Otto fucking Hightower gives the page to Rhaenyra. And in that moment, Daemon says, let's end this mama's farce. And that's something that was actually spouted in the first episode as well, which I've also found that was interesting. So he draws his sword, and these motherfuckers are about to wild out again, just like in the first episode. Second episode. Just in that other episode, drawing very similar, strong similarities to the current episode that we're on right now, the last. And as he draws out the sword, Rhaenyra's no, not here, no. I will. King's Landing will have my answer by the morning, which is basically, for anybody out there that doesn't know it, anybody that ever says that, hey, sorry about that, guys. We're just counted a little bit of a technical difficulty there. Like I said, I don't know what's going on with this crazy place. But just like I was saying before, what was I saying before? I actually can't remember. All right, we're just going to start off from right here, I guess, in the talk that Damon and Rhaenyra was basically having. When Rhaenyra basically tries to tell Damon about the Song of Ice and Fire, basically the thing that happens at the end of Game of Thrones, Damon looks at her like, what the fuck is she talking about? Is she crazy? And Rhaenyra goes on to try to explain it to her, and it basically grips her by the neck and attempting to, or what it looks like, is attempting to strangle her. This draws back to what I was saying before. I don't know if Damon is really on her side. I don't know what side Damon is really on. I think Damon is on his own side. Despite having children with her, despite being basically a father to Lucerys and Jace or whatever it is, and another little one, we don't know where his loyalties lie. We don't know if he's on the good side, on the right side of this, if he's really in support of the queen being ruler, because in the end, on what might have decided it in the end, realistically is like he might be on the side of Damon. He might find that he's the rightful claim to the throne because he is the brother to the king, despite the king having sons and the ex-wives. But honestly, yeah, that might essentially be what it comes down to, really. So in the next scene, we see Lord Corlys is actually awake. Lord Corlys, or I'd rather refer to him as Bob Mr. Marley. He's finally awake. Yeah. Flip, flip, flip. All right, yeah. He's finally awake, and he's talking to Rhaenys, his wife, about basically everything that's been happening, because he's being knocked the fuck out. He's getting caught up, right? And one of the things he gets caught up on was that his brother is dead, and he's just like, oh. Like, well, what the fuck? Like that reaction, I thought that we were gonna get a little bit of a bigger reaction from him when he found out his brother was dead. I mean, all he really did was sit up. All he really did was sit up. He was like, "You're dead." I thought it was gonna get like essentially a bigger reaction. And they started to have a discussion of what's basically been happening with Westeros and what's happening with what's happening with the whole succession to the line thing. So he is still beaten up, but he started trying to talk to her about this. And he was suggesting to her that, hey, fuck this shit. Fuck all of this shit. I'm tired. You're tired. Let's go live. We can still be old and live somewhere together and be tired together. And that's when Rhaenys is like, you know what? And she actually makes the decision. She actually commits to the decision. She's like, you know what? I'm not into this anymore. I'm not into any of this really. But I got to support my cousin. And the way she does that, she's kind of like, okay, we should support Rhaenyra in her time of need of correcting this wrong, because the kingship has been essentially stolen from her. I think that's the right. That's probably the best way to put it. Her kingship, yeah, her kingship has essentially been stolen, or placed in the crown, however you will call it. But yeah, and he says he's in this pursuit of the Iron Throne. It's cost him so much, and I agree with it. At that point, I mean, like realistically, you gotta like look at it like again, like they're old and like, what's the point in chasing this thing that's like just making you unhappy when you can be content, but you can be just independent. But she mentions that Jace, Luke, and Joff will never be safe from essentially the hand of Aegon, because they're direct descendants and claimants to the throne. I found it funny how not Rhaenyra, who is currently ruling right now, or supposed to be on top of the throne right now, isn't really even mentioned in that list. That's first. But yeah. And the second thing is that Rhaenys does mention that, like, hey, Rhaenyra is the only one, I guess, that is keeping a cool head or a level head and basically essentially preventing this war. Yes, I agree with that 110%. She has been showing restraint and showing patience, I think, as well, when it comes to proceeding forward potentially with this war. Because, like, and even like you see the contrast with like Daemon realistically, he was ready to go to war. He's ready to fight. He's ready to go to war. He's ready to get this done. He's ready to get her done. He's ready to go. And when her niece is kind of like, okay, like, not her niece, well, Rhaenyra is kind of like, well, we need to see who our enemies are first, and we need to see who our allies are first. It's a smart move, because like if she was just going guns a-blazing, we don't necessarily know what motherfuckers might decide to turn on her, or who isn't going to essentially turn on her, and she might necessarily not even have the numbers to take back Westeros in the first place, despite these fucking dragons. But like as she mentions as well, these dragons have never been too bold. So, I mean, it's something to definitely consider. However, I think that personally, what they should have done was that, like, I guess, yeah, do the right thing in terms of like looking after the people who swore loyalty to you, and make sure that they don't go defective and lose their minds and decide to follow the Green King instead, which is fucking ridiculous. I'm not gonna get too much into that because we covered it in the other episode of OnReviewCast. Yeah. So they're strategizing around the meeting, and Lord Corlys is basically questioning her about all these different situations and etc. And during this explanation, he feels loyalty. He commits loyalty to Rhaenyra, and he says to her that, hey, you know what? We're gonna keep our word and support you essentially no matter what. And we were realistic. It's not like why it was so hard for her cousin to basically support her. And like all of us need a little bit of help sometimes. Like sometimes we need more. Some of us need more help than others, but we definitely sometimes need help every once in a while. And the fact that she's getting it here from Lord Corlys and Rhaenys means a big toll, because one of the things that they were also saying in this episode is that they could cut off the circulation plus supply of supply to and from that of Westeros or King's Landing, because the shipping lane is basically what's controlled by Lord Corlys, essentially. But yeah, that's essentially the episode. And their strategy is to, like I said before, figure out exactly who are the allies and who are the enemies, and who with them, who is not with them, and etc., etc. And this leads to the idea that we could send dragon riders off to X, Y, and Z to remind them of the oath that certain families had with one another, and in general, what they had. So, yeah. Yeah. So it's this decision, honestly, though, that kind of seals the deal for you know who towards the end of this particular episode. And I thought that was foreshadowing. Knowing that, though, going into this now is kind of a little bit of a different experience. And so Rhaenyra has these scrolls, and she offers it to these to her boys. And when offering it to these boys, her boys, so when they show up at their designated places, they could just basically give it to the ruler of that land, so they could band together for their fight and remember that their alliance is essentially strong. But she summons Luce and Jacaerys, and she gets out a Bible, and she knows that the beef between Alicent and etc. for all the blacks, and she knows that for the Alicent crew. And despite knowing this and making them swear basically on a Bible, she, after they do it, she commits them to fulfilling the mission and having essentially a lot to do. But like I said, this is definitely plays a little bit different, knowing what I know now, knowing what we know now with the finale and how focused they were on the series. And I was like, while watching it, I kind of knew something was not gonna be right, or something was gonna be off when it basically and essentially came down to to him. And I thought that they were focusing way too much, and they were focusing way too much and tugging on a lot of heartstrings when it came to his character overall, and not just his interaction with his mother, but his interaction overall, X, Y, and Z. Yeah, really. Yeah. So they hop on Dragonback, because that's a new thing. They hop on Dragonback and they head towards these places, especially reminding them of the convoy, or reminding them of the fealty that they once swore to House of Valerian. House Valerian. And something I got to comment on is the music in this. We don't really often talk about it on OnReviewCast, but the music in Game of Thrones is really good. I really like how they do the toning in terms of like this is a little bit of a nerdy musical thing, but like they play a lot of major chords, right? Right. This is I'm talking about specifically with the scene with Lucerys walking or flying into this, which is what seemed like a storm, or some kind of chaotic wilderness, as he looks back to his mother for safety and basically essentially reassurance. So he's flying off into this dark cloud-based area, and when he does this, right? When he does this, the music in the background is playing. It's playing like it goes from like a C chord, like major chords. It goes from major chord, major chord, major chord, and we don't feel anything until it goes to like that minor progression. It gives us a certain undertone of, or a certain hint or undertone of like, this is probably gonna be the last time we actually see him alive, because that's when I definitely thought about that on the first take. I was like, oh fuck, like you loving this dude too much, something's gonna go wrong. That might okay, and it's like okay, they're being champions, they're going off and riding into the sunset, but into the clouds of the sun. As they're going into the clouds of the sun as they fly off. But Jacaerys still looks back, and then Jacaerys looking back, we hear that I shouldn't say A minor, but we hear a minor chord, some kind of minor indicator that this isn't gonna be what you essentially think about. This might essentially be weird, and completely ridiculous. Daemon's talk with the dragon. In this section, we get to see Daemon doesn't really actually talk to the dragon. He sings to the dragon. He sings to a big ass motherfucking beast with all kind of crazy, fucked up like teeth, and he basically imprints on it, and he imprints with it. And I know that there's a lot of rumors out there circulating between exactly who this dragon is, who this dragon wants to belong to, any kind of history and everything about this dragon. There's dragons in the show, guys. Like, what the fuck? You want more dragon? There's dragons in the fucking show. You just gotta have to just watch it. And I think that, again, like, it's such a big series, and that's one of the things. It'll be such a big series that everybody has basically an opinion about it. And this doesn't necessarily mean their opinion is right. But by everything that's being shown, the fact of the matter is, yeah. So as Lucerys is going to go and visit one of the first kings of the kingdom, or what have you, he sees Vhagar. Dragons, the biggest in the land. One of the Vhagar's dragons, and Vhagar is roaring into the night sky. So if Vhagar is there, we already know that who else is going to be there, right? And man, I gotta tell you, I know that like this is probably not the first time it's come up with, so it's probably not the first time it's basically being mentioned to him. I'm sure it hasn't. It can't be. But the Aedon, I think it's Aedon or Aemon. I don't know. The guy that basically lost his eye when he was a kid. That he's there. That should have been some kind of indicator that one of the Greens is there for their side, essentially. There's a lot that could have essentially gone different about this meeting, not only this meeting, but again, the inevitable cause that comes out towards the end. So, sorry, Lucerius basically delivers the message of saying, hey, like, these are Rhaenyra's terms, and this is what you want to hear from Rhaenyra. And he, goes on to basically say that we have heard, from the king a different story of X, Y, and Z. So it seems like there's some kind of blood disputes between the nations, between the blacks and the green, and I guess he knows that. But he knows that now, obviously, because they were about to wild out. But realistically, anyway, the whole premise of this was that, which is so funny because, like, the whole premise of this was based off of the fact that, like, it is based off of the fact that Lucerius has nothing to basically bring him, and he came in there, like, even like with this, the king basically told him that he came in there essentially empty-handed, and that at least that Sephiroth looking motherfucker offered to marry one of her girls, if it means that they can stay in power and you realign yourself with the queen, or with the correct queen, or with the correct king. So you come here basically essentially empty-handed. And what he essentially tells him is to, go home, like, don't worry about this X, Y, and Z. And he's like, very well, I should take my answers to my mother. And before he could leave, so Sephiroth, referring to him as Sephiroth, we know it's everybody aim on it, Sephiroth basically says, like, hey, like, listen, my lord Strong, because you're so strong, where we're at from, like, the episode before, anyway. My lord Strong, he starts wanting his eye. Demanding that he cut his own eye out, and etc. And before he could actually do it, or before he's actually set up to do it, the fucking king of those lands stopped him, and he was kind of like, hey, like, listen, like, we can't come as a convoy. Don't split up, or don't try and attack my people when they are or don't get them in the middle of it while they're essentially just doing their jobs. And it's funny because Lucerius actually obeys his mother, and he obeys him putting his hand on the Bible, and he decides not to go ahead and engage with Sephiroth, and he says, like, no, I won't fight you, this is not what I'm here for. And I'm here, and he basically says it with actions, not so much words, that I basically had to just deliver a convoy. And that was basically it. And Lucerius was escorted back to his dragon, and that's what it seems like. It was basically the end of it. And it's raining outside now when he returns back to the dragon, and the scene looks basically fucking chaotic. Everything's going on, and despite the rain, etc., he's like, you know what? Fuck this rain. I'm flying. Now, if that was me, I would have been like, dude, no, fuck this rain. I'm gonna go ask if I could just stay in a shelter somewhere just for a little while. That land that he was on was like castle. It was very nice. I don't understand why he just couldn't wait until the clouds had parted and the sun was out for him to try to make his getaway. Or he could just talk to the guy. And I understand that might have been a greater conflict, because if Damon had basically essentially just stayed there, he might not have been able to control himself, and they would have ended up fighting anyway. But who knows? So he doesn't choose that, though. He chooses to go the way of riding the fucking dragon through this storm. And as he's riding the dragon, Vhagar starts to stalk him, essentially. And in during stalking him, he almost eats him the first time, but he's able to basically get away. And you can tell from the way that he's riding, and the way that the dragon is reacting to the way that he is treating him. And he's acting out in an outspoken way, basically says a lot. And so Vhagar essentially is chasing Lucerius. He's chasing him and chasing him and chasing him. And then Lucerys, I will admit, like put up a good fight. He's using a lot of moves in terms of like going through narrow canvases and knowing where Vhagar basically can't go because he's bigger, and going through narrow canvases and just trying to his best to essentially get away from these big bullies. No pun intended. Even though Vhagar is like the strongest and biggest and the strongest in the land, essentially. Yeah. But out of nowhere, during this fight in the rain, this fight through the storm, essentially, during this fight in the storm, he actually, Lucerys' dragon is actually able to land a definite blow of fire onto the cheeks of Vhagar, and Vhagar is like, no, I'm pissed, and then Sephiroth is like, no, Vhagar, no, save me. I thought that this is so funny because like he's a wild animal. It's a wild animal. He was only being complicit to you to a certain degree. He only complicit to you to a certain degree. So while that's happening and he's being essentially chased, Lucerys pulls up out of the dark clouds and he reveals himself. And after revealing himself from the dark and not so favorable weather, the dragon comes out of fucking nowhere from the left side and chomp right on it. This is a beautiful scene to see, but obviously Vhagar basically didn't have any control. He didn't have any control over Vhagar, one. And then two, Lucerys, I feel like if he had more time, he could have found a way to dodge that. But that's the end of the episode. He essentially murders him. Well, sorry, that's not the end of the episode. A few moments later, we see a man walking towards the strategy room of what's going on. And this man is actually Daemon. And Daemon basically, we could see it in her face, tells her the news of essentially what's basically happened now. And you can see it square in the face, as pure as daylight, that she's fucking pissed. She's fucking pissed. She's ready to go. She's fucking pissed. Because now it essentially means war. And that's the end of the episode. Definitely a decent episode. I think that there were, in terms of season finales go, pretty good. Definitely can't wait for season 2. It's gonna be amazing. Let's just jump into the section called Ash's favorite scenes. Ash's favorite scenes. Oh yeah. Definitely coming at number 3, favorite scenes. I gotta admit, was pretty cool. When they all knelt to her and they all recognized her as being queen, and as they walk through the hallway with her, and she's like, no, it's basically just recognizing who the current queen was and how that's how royalty works, and it was just very, very well put together. Coming in hot at number 2 was the standoff at the wall. Now this was actually pretty cool because it just tried back everything that was in the season 1. And they things definitely changed. Daemon is now married to Rhaenyra, and they have kids together, and everything just looks a little bit older and a little bit different. However, it plays out the exact same way, and it kind of just reinforces that the kind of ruler that Rhaenyra would essentially be, and that's why I liked it. And coming in hot at number 1, my favorite scene, guys, you know what it's gonna be. It is definitely that scene with the chomp. Yeah. And how Vhagar wouldn't listen to anything that the Sephiroth was saying. I just thought that was so cool, the way that they did it and the way that they shot it, where you couldn't necessarily tell what happened to the boy, and you couldn't even tell, but you could see the blood of the dragon being snapped like a fucking twig, and the regret on Aemon's, the second son of Alicent's, when he has like huge regrets of essentially what just happened. And that was Asher's favorite scenes. Yeah. Linda, can we get the on-review score, please?
House of the Dragon episode 10 receives a 5 out of 5.
Well, guys, that's enough Game of Thrones. Oh, Game of Thrones. That's enough House of Dragons, guys. I'm out of time. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this run of House of the Dragons with me. It's been so good. Stay tuned next to see what the next new series is. It's gonna be exciting, guys. And all I can say is it'll be definitely worth riding here with me in the journey of discovering true beautiful stories of today. But anyway, guys, like I said, all out of time. Thanks for listening again. And just before I go, like I always say, be safe, be kind, be you. Take care.